contrary to Rudy Giuliani and the rest of the crackpots, Joe Biden will be president. He is rumored or reported to be appointing Susan Rice, Michelle Flournoy, not exactly, champions of Palestine, these people. Biden, kind of your cardboard cutout, Chamber of Commerce Democrat, who, to me, it will be status quo as far as, platitudes about a two-state solution, but basically allowing Israel to do whatever it wants. You obviously are an expert on foreign policy and these figures' background. What should people expect, not just from Biden, but the people he's going to put in his cabinet?
Well, one important thing was from In These Times, Sarah Lazar talked about how 1/3 of Biden's Pentagon transition team hails from think tanks and organizations that are essentially financed by the weapons industry. So you have think tanks like the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, which employs several people that are part of Biden's DoD agency review team, and those are directly funded by corporations like Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. They also receive money from like countries like the UAE, which is, bombing the shit out of Yemen and exacerbating that genocide right there. And Trump actually just oversaw a huge weapons shipment to the UAE, exacerbating the death toll in Yemen. Then you have two individuals that are part of the CNAS, the Center for New American Security. This is a think tank that essentially you can thank this think tank for the last 10 to 15 years of foreign policy under the Democratic administration of Barack Obama. This was a very, very influential think tank. This is where Michelle Flournoy is connected to. She's touted as like, the first woman, right, to run the Pentagon. And that's what you see, I think, with a lot of Biden's transition team so far and a lot of these potential picks. It's like Susan Rice, the first Black woman to potentially be in this role. And it's like, when you go past these kind of, rhetorical platitudes, and not just rhetorical platitudes. I mean, these are, hugely symbolic, of course, for people of color to take positions of power. But when you go past these, when you go past the symbolism, it really is just the same bipartisan imperialism and policy of U.S. empire, right? That's subjugating tens of millions of people around the world. And in fact, the people that he's positioning for these roles are the worst of the worst, not to use a Bush administration term, but like really, really horrific people here that are just the most hawkish foreign policy grunts in Washington. Let's take a look at Michelle Flournoy, for example. What's really, really bizarre about her, she's been in the foreign policy establishment blob for a very long time, going back to May of 1997 when she was serving under President Clinton as an assistant secretary of defense. She drafted something called the Quadrennial Defense Review, which essentially laid the ideological foundation of like endless war. Very, very interesting here. This is a precursor to the AUMF. The AUMF is used, of course, from the Bush administration and beyond to root out Al-Qaeda and, engage in any sort of military combat anywhere at any time with no like international approval, right? This is just a unilateral deployment of U.S. military power. And she coined this thing called a defense strategy on the QDR that essentially said this. It said, quote, when the interests at stake are vital, we should do whatever it takes to defend them, including the unilateral use of military power. Mind you, 4 years before 9/11. She said, vital interests include, quote, preventing the emergence of a hostile regional coalition anywhere on Earth and, quote, ensuring uninhabited access to key markets, energy supplies, and strategic resources. Like, really, really crazy, right? That she's basically saying we have the right and duty as the U.S. empire to just take any resources available on the planet. And this was before 9/11. This is like unbelievable hawkishness. So yeah, I mean, it goes on and on. She helped craft Obama's endless Afghanistan war strategy, just every like horrible foreign policy blunder under his administration. Libya, Syria, she was right there helping draft these policy. And she's also like on the board of Booz Allen, which is a huge consulting firm. And she's just been going in and out of this revolving door of the contractor circuit for quite some time, just securing millions of dollars in military contracts. But yeah, I mean, the CNAS is a really, really bad think tank. You have Secretary of State Susan Rice, which is being floated as Secretary of State, like I said, the first Black woman, and so everyone's touting her as that. But really, like, she is a horrible war hawk, and this is going back again toward Clinton. She was in charge of Africa policy for Clinton. She defended brutal dictators across Africa, like the dictator who was overseeing the Rwandan genocide, Paul Kagame. And she also, infamously, people blame Clinton for bombing that pharmaceutical company in Sudan as a retaliation for the embassy bombing going back to the bin Laden strategy under Bill Clinton. And she actually oversaw that strike that destroyed a pharmaceutical company that had no connection to the attack. So that was one of the infamous war crimes under Clinton that I actually didn't realize that she was responsible for until doing some research about her. But it's like the worst of the worst, Jordan. I mean, she's talking about, you go back to her defending Colin Powell, talking about WMDs, saying he clearly, made a clear-cut case for Saddam having WMDs, completely adamant about how we should preemptively attack Iraq. She was one of the leading advocates for imperialist intervention in Libya and Syria, and also, again, a staunch defender of Zionism and Israel's war crimes. I mean, she was actually seen in the UN, the international body under Obama, as like one of the staunchest defenders of Israel, and just constantly defended every single massacre that they were engaging in Palestine. She also, like, infamously drove that wedge between the US, Russia, Syria, the whole Assad chemical weapon stuff under Obama's tenure. And amazingly enough, she was very, very close to Obama, involved in the Terror Tuesdays, where he would pick out who to assassinate via drone week to week. So pretty much every single horrible foreign policy, thing that Obama was doing, she was right there every step of the way, giving advice to. And she has Joe Biden's ear. They've been friends for a very, very long time. She's also heavily invested in, like, fossil fuels, the Keystone XL pipeline, Trans-Canada. She's worth tens of millions of dollars. So I think that it just, her with Michelle Flournoy and plus all of these think tanks that are involved in his Pentagon transition team just really goes to show you what his foreign policy will be like. And it is so far right that it's just a slap in the face to the Bernie Sanders coalition. Again, like, he ran on this repudiation of Bernie Sanders. So it's just, again, just so offensive to the base that rallied behind him to, oust the fascists from the White House. And so it's just, I think it just is really demoralizing for people who want to move Biden left, who want to, keep pushing that coalition to try to employ a more humane, responsible foreign policy. And again, defunding the Pentagon, which we're spending $2 billion a day to subjugate and oppress tens of millions of people around the world when we're told we can't have Medicare for all.
Right. And with Biden, I mean, he has a history. I think Bernie didn't go after him hard enough, frankly. It's not only that he voted for Iraq, he was cheerleading for Iraq when it was already clearly a mess. I mean, years after the war was launched, he was still publicly supporting it. But the thing is, he, as far as I know, he hasn't said anything about his stance on Afghanistan. We're headed 20 years there. Bernie Rocana did a bipartisan bill. First time the War Powers Act was ever used to end U.S. involvement in Yemen. Trump obviously vetoed it. I haven't heard anything from Biden on whether he would honor that bipartisan, the passing of the War Powers Act. And we know, frankly, I mean, he's about to step into a shit show economically. And what has the U.S. done historically? If they need a little economic boost, that would be war. So what are your thoughts on specifically Afghanistan, Yemen, and other hotspots? Because to me, he's been kind of vague on what he would do and what wars he would end versus, quote, drawing down troops.
Yeah, so Biden has been asked about Afghanistan once in the debates because he was VP when Obama oversaw that massive troop surge, which was a horrible, futile effort to, win the war, and really just caused, a ridiculous amount of deaths and just prolonged the already endless war. And he just kind of stuttered and stammered his way through that answer. He didn't even know what she was talking about at first. He was like, Afghanistan? Like, is that what you're talking about? It's like, yeah, dude, Afghanistan. Like, what are you talking about? It was on the heels of the Afghanistan papers that basically just documented 20 years of Pentagon blunders where you had general after general passing off the war to the next administration and just saying the same exact rhetoric, that the end was in sight, and you've just been hearing the same line. So Biden also was challenged about it, I think in a 60 Minutes interview recently, where he said he would leave thousands of troops on the ground, essentially exactly what Trump has done. Trump, after all of this posturing as this anti-war populist candidate, at the end of the day, he's only withdrawn 5,000 troops over his entire tenure of the last 4 years. When he got into office, he inherited 8,500 troops from the Obama administration. He immediately doubled that to 14,000, as well as nearly quadrupled drone strikes, doubled civilian casualties, made fatalities of not only Afghan people, but U.S. soldiers at an all-time high for many, many years, I think since the U.S. invasion. And so we saw horrible bloodletting under the Trump administration when he first took office. And of course, the use of the largest non-nuclear bomb ever to be dropped, the Moab, the mother of all bombs, basically a tribute to the mother of all cities, right? Mecca, really offensive to Muslim people. You had his generals saying, we're not going to waste our time digging through rubble to count dead bodies to find out how many people actually died from dropping that Moab bomb, which had a blast radius of 1 mile. He said he took the gloves off for the Pentagon. He essentially gave them carte blanche to do what they wanted. And we saw the effects of that. And actually, we saw more of a lack of transparency under Trump than ever before, where we actually don't know how many people are dying from drones and bombings now. But Joe Biden was directly asked, and he said thousands of troops. And this is like alongside thousands of special contractors, right? Special ops soldiers, drone bases, civilian contractors, private mercenaries, which we already knew Trump increased 65% when he got into Afghanistan, when he oversaw policy in Afghanistan, when he got into office. And that actually consists of more than half of the troops on the ground are private mercenaries who are completely unaccountable, and we don't know if they're staying. So everyone gives Trump credit. Everyone thought, oh my God, all this Pentagon shakeup that just happened where he fired Mark Esper, and everyone just kind of like bent over backwards to excuse his inaction for the past 4 years and be like, finally, he's going to end the war, right? Well, really, it just meant nothing. We ended up seeing really quickly what that was, and it was him probably trying to consolidate power at the very end of his administration, and it really meant nothing. I mean, Trump talks a big game. He keeps tweeting out empty platitudes that pretend to be anti-war, and at the end of the day, he has final authority over all troop withdrawals. Trump could have ended the war on day one. He made enough executive orders to basically do whatever he wanted at the beginning, right? He could have at least said, and bring the troops home. The Pentagon is subservient to him. He did nothing. He did nothing at all. And so I just don't understand why so many people excused him, right? And actually pretended that Trump was anti-war. And unfortunately, Biden made it really easy because he was fighting Trump from the right a lot of the times. During the debate, he actually fought Trump from the right on punishing North Korea and China. You saw him running ads saying Trump was actually a China puppet. It's just absolutely bizarre.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.